I grew up in Beirut in the late 60s and early 70s. We had, like many houses, we had Persian rugs on the floor at home to keep you warm in the winter. And I would drive my cars, my Matchbox cars around them, and I would build forms that were corresponding to the patterns in the carpets. Therefore, I understood how complex a system, visual system, making a rug is, and how complex a craft it is. That perhaps is the most formative of my visual education. I lost my father when I was 6 years old. He died of a heart attack. My mother, kept the family together. She kept us focused on our education. She was an educator herself. She still is in some ways. I was also always keen about the visual world, the arts, architecture from my childhood. I think that was influenced a lot by the fact that I grew up in a house that my father, who was a contractor, designed with two architect friends of his. And it was a tiny house, but it was a beautiful house. And it had a lot of the modernist features, but it also had a lot of nature in the house and the house in nature. It was different. The walls were colored. There were big glass doors that slide, and you could mix inside and outside in a way that the regular apartment building in Beirut couldn't. So it stood out. And so that shaped my personality quite a bit and my interest in architecture. Ever since I was 3 years old, I said I want to be an architect. I never knew what it meant, but I just wanted to do something like that. Beirut was the center of the universe. Beach, sun, mountains, ski. It was truly just a lively, chaotic, messy, celebratory space that we grew up in until it turned violent in 1975. At that time, I was about 10 years old and had to go to boarding school. In the end, even though I had to leave Lebanon because of the war that kept going on and continued my studies in the US, Beirut is still with me in many forms. I am kind of in a Beirut state of mind always. The war kept going on, so I said I might as well get a master's. I went to Harvard, got a master's. The war kept going on, taught for a short stint at MIT, became very interested in architecture theory at the time, and then said, okay, why don't I continue for a PhD? So I sort of walked backwards into my academic career, even though I enjoy it tremendously. But I'm certain that I first knew about MIT when I was studying architecture history in Beirut in my first years as an architecture student. And in our architecture textbook, there were buildings, beautiful modernist buildings that were included in our textbook that were at MIT. I knew about those buildings before I knew about MIT. The chapel, Kresge Auditorium, Baker House. I believe that the world is made by us and therefore can be transformed by us rather than given to us and us having to keep it the way it is. There's no way I can be a professor of architecture without being a practitioner. There's no way I can be an architect without being curious about some of the things that are emerging in the academic world because they're opening up possibilities for building. So I think of teaching as asking questions to the students that I'm asking in my practice, bringing to the table problems that I don't know how to solve, but that I'm thinking about. We're all rational, compassionate human beings first. And then, oh, and by the way, I come from Beirut. By the way, I come from Macedonia. By the way, it's something that we take to be for granted, that we come from somewhere and we have a unique story to tell. We celebrate identity, but we don't essentialize it.